The Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896, the shortest war in history. The Anglo-Zanzibar War of August 27, 1896, remains one of the most bizarre conflicts in history. It lasted between 38 to 45 minutes, making it the shortest recorded war ever. Despite its brevity, the war was the result of decades of British imperial policy, Zanzibar's strategic importance, and the shifting balance of power in East Africa. This in-depth examination will explore the geopolitical background of Zanzibar, the lead-up to the war and the power struggle, a minute-by-minute breakdown of the war itself, the aftermath and its consequences, the broader implications for British colonialism in Africa. Zanzibar, a jewel in the Indian Ocean. The Sultanate of Zanzibar, located off the coast of present-day Tanzania, was one of the most powerful and wealthy trading centers in the Indian Ocean during the 19th century. Originally part of the Omani Empire, it became an independent sultanate in 1856. Due to its prime location, it was a hub for spice trade, especially cloves, nutmeg, and cinnamon, ivory trade, exported from the African interior, slave trade, one of the largest slave markets in the world in the 19th century. By the late 1800s, European colonial powers, especially Britain and Germany, were carving up Africa in what became known as the Scramble for Africa. Britain, which had abolished slavery in its empire in 1833, sought to end Zanzibar's slave trade and establish control over the region. British influence in Zanzibar. In 1890, Britain and Germany signed the Heligoland-Zanzibar Treaty, dividing their spheres of influence in East Africa. Under this agreement, Germany ceded Zanzibar to Britain as a protectorate. Britain ceded Heligoland, a small island in the North Sea, to Germany. This treaty made Zanzibar a British protectorate, meaning it was not formally part of the British Empire, but was under British control in matters of foreign policy and trade. The puppet sultans. The British allowed the sultans of Zanzibar to retain their ceremonial rule, as long as they followed British directives. The British expected the sultans to cooperate in efforts to abolish slavery and modernize Zanzibar under British supervision. Sultan Bargash bin Said, 1870 to 1888, resisted British influence, but eventually signed a treaty abolishing the slave trade in 1873. Sultan Khalifa bin Said, 1888 to 1890, friendly to the British, helped implement reforms. Sultan Ali bin Said, 1890 to 1893, further reduced Zanzibar's slave trade. Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini, 1893 to 1896, closely aligned with Britain and acted as a British puppet ruler. The British were determined to keep their hold on Zanzibar and ensure any ruler followed their wishes. The succession crisis, the spark of war. On August 25, 1896, Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini suddenly died, allegedly poisoned by his cousin Khalid bin Bargash. Within hours, Khalid declared himself sultan and took control of the sultan's palace. The British, however, had already chosen a successor, Hamoud bin Mohammed, a pro-British noble. The British authorities, led by Consul Basil Cave, demanded that Khalid step down immediately. Khalid's defiance. Unlike his predecessors, Sultan Khalid refused British control. Instead, he fortified the palace with 2,800 soldiers and slaves, seized weapons and ammunition from the palace armory, positioned artillery to defend the palace and the harbor. Khalid assumed that the British would not dare attack him, as no sultan had ever been forcibly removed. However, he underestimated Britain's determination to enforce its will. The war. The 38-minute conflict. August 26, 1896, the British ultimatum. The British fleet, led by Rear Admiral Harry Rawson, issued an ultimatum at 2 p.m. on August 26. Khalid must step down by 9 a.m. on August 27th, or Britain would take military action. Khalid ignored the ultimatum and reinforced his palace. August 27, 1896, the battle begins. 8 a.m. British forces take positions. 3 British warships, HMS St. George, Raccoon, and Thrush, move into attack formation. British troops land in Zanzibar town, supported by local pro-British forces. 8:30 a.m., Khalid refuses to surrender. Khalid barricades himself in the palace. His forces aim cannons at British ships. 9:02 a.m., the British open fire. HMS Thrush fires the first shot at the Sultan's palace. HMS St. George and HMS Raccoon follow with heavy bombardment. The palace begins to collapse and catches fire within minutes. Sultan Khalid's artillery is destroyed almost instantly. 9:05 a.m., Zanzibar's navy is sunk. Khalid's royal yacht, the HHS Glasgow, attempts to flee. It is sunk within minutes by British gunfire. 9:20 a.m., Khalid's forces begin to flee. Seeing the devastation, Khalid's army surrenders or flees. Over 500 Zanzibaris are dead or wounded. The British suffer one minor injury. 9:40 a.m., the war ends. The palace is reduced to ruins. Khalid flees to the German consulate and seeks asylum. The British declare Hamoud bin Mohammed as the new Sultan of Zanzibar. The war cemented Britain's total dominance over Zanzibar. The British immediately installed Sultan Hamoud bin Mohammed, who abolished slavery in 1897, disbanded the Zanzibari army, enforced direct British rule over Zanzibar's administration. Khalid's fate. Khalid remained under German protection for 2 years. In 1898, he escaped to German East Africa, now Tanzania. In 1916, during WWI, the British captured Khalid and exiled him to Seychelles. He later lived in Mombasa, Kenya, where he died in 1927. Legacy: what the shortest war tells us. The Anglo-Zanzibar War is often remembered as a quirky historical footnote, but it symbolized the absolute power of the British Empire at its height, the collapse of independent rule in Zanzibar, the transition from an Arab-led slave economy to a British-controlled protectorate, a demonstration of how Britain enforced its will through sheer military force. Zanzibar remained under British rule until 1963, when it finally gained independence. Conclusion: a war over before it began. While the Anglo-Zanzibar War lasted less than an hour, it was the culmination of decades of colonial power struggles. It remains a testament to the overwhelming firepower of the British Empire, marking yet another chapter in the brutal history of imperialism.